Is there a legit reason to think you could rank a franchise GBPs if the franchisor has a broken website? Um, it works, but it has some major problems. We cannot build a second website. We can only write blog articles, work on the GBPs, do press releases, and possibly build an ID page and links, of course. I've seen this problem before where the franchisees are relying on a broken mothership, excuse me, and the company obviously hasn't a clue about SEO. I'm just wondering if it's a gig I should consider or if our hands would be too tied without the ability to fix the main site. Thanks. Well, no, I understand your pain on that. I really do, David. So that's one of the things that, if you don't, it's like a client asking you to go into a fight with one arm tied behind your back. Like that's what they're telling you to do. And that's difficult. And so, there's really the only option that I have for you is to just build a external asset. So it's a branded asset. So here's an example, a Google site, right? Sites.google.com is perfect for this, where you can go mirror, and we have an SOP in our mastermind specifically for this. It's G sites for local SEO or Google sites for local SEO. And what we teach is how to mirror the main website structure. And if the main website structure sucks, then that's your opportunity to use the branded G site instead to build the appropriate structure into the site, into the G site, so the Google sites, and then use that as your, all that site's going to be tied back to the main website, the franchisee's website, which sucks and is broken, as you're mentioning. But what you can do is correct poor structure from the main site in the G site. Like, in other words, you can correct the structure in the Google site, make that proper, remember, guys, I've done extensive training on this. Back to that asshole's question earlier, Mike, whoever that was. I've done extensive training on this, even in just Hump Day Hangouts recently, about how what you should be focusing on for local SEO is page structure, site structure, and internal linking for on page for the self-hosted site. In this case, it would be page structure, site structure, internal linking on the G site that then would be tied back to the main website, the franchisee site. But then you would do all of your external link building, blogging, content, everything on the G site, right? So it's almost like the G site becomes the primary website, but you don't make it so. In other words, it's not linked to from the Google Business Profile as the main website, but you're using that as kind of a container, a wraparound to wrap around the main website. In other words, when I talk about using Google Sites for local SEO, we use a mirror structure, and we take the Google site and we mirror, if the main website is done properly, then we're going to mirror that structure into a Google site, and the main website pages are just embedded into the G site pages because it's a 1-to-1 ratio. There's every page, every top level page on the money site and all the important pages. We're not talking about blog posts and stuff. You can omit that. But if you're going to use the G site as the blog, then you would be posting, publishing posts or pages as blog posts on the G site. But what I'm saying is we would take top level pages. So product or service page, the homepage, product or service pages, and location pages. And we would mirror those into, so in other words, create pages on the G site, a 1-to-1 ratio. So for every top level page, you have a corresponding page on the G site with the same kind of structure. Now, if you're correcting structure, then you're going to develop the structure in the G site. But if you're dealing with a site that you have access to, the money site that you've done properly, then you would just mirror that. And so to get back to my point about why we use the G site is because when you do it that way, then when you mirror the primary structure, if it's done correctly, then all you're doing is embedding the money site pages into their corresponding pages on the G site. And then you can add some additional content if needed. And then you can correct the internal linking and do all the internal linking and everything that you would normally do on a money site in the G site. So that when you build links to any of the G site pages, if you have your internal linking done properly, then it's going to flow to the relevant places of the site and thereby power up the other pages through internal links. And so in your question, David, if you're talking about a site that has poor structure, that's not, you're limited as to what you can do to optimize it and all that kind of stuff, then I would still create a G site where I would then link to and embed the main website, if it's embeddable, into that G site and for whatever the current pages that they have or whatever. But then I would go through and use the G site as the actual main website as far as your work is concerned, which means building the proper structure, internal links, all of that, and then using that as the main link building target as well. Because then everything that you do can be kind of directed at the one site that you have more control over. And if you connect it properly to the main website, money site, then that relevance and link equity and all of that is going to flow through to the main site anyways. The G site may end up outranking the main website as far as organically. But because the main website is tied to or linked to from the GBP, the map should perform better from the link equity and relevance and all that you're pushing from the G site into the main site. But organically, the G site may outrank the main site, and that's fine. It's still a branded asset. It's still going to direct any visitor to contact the company. So what difference does it make? And that's what I would do, because again, you know, the alternative is if you have the option of like creating a subdomain site that, like a WordPress site, for example, that you could add on a blog.subdomain of whatever the franchisee site is. But I know some franchises have restrictions against that kind of stuff. And if that's the case, then you have to work within the constraints that are, you know, that you have. And that's all there is to it, or walk away and go find another client. You know, that's your alternative option. Because remember, if a client is asking you to go into a fight with one arm tied behind your back, then you may want to walk away from the fight altogether, right? So you don't get your ass kicked. And I mean that, like, because again, occasionally I'll have a link building client that tells me that they don't want me to do certain things. And then I tell them, well, okay, but then, you know, you can't say that my company, Semantic Links, is responsible for the SEO performance of your project if you're telling me what I can and can't do. You either let me do what I know needs to be done, or you restrict me, but then performance is not on my shoulders. It's not my responsibility, because you're telling me not to do things that I know is needed in order to get results. And so there are some cases where I've turned those clients away, just told them, you know what, this isn't a good fit. I'm sorry, go find another link builder. And I don't say that to be mean. I just say it because, like, you know, those are constraints that I'm not comfortable with. If you're going to put, if the performance of your campaign is at least partially my responsibility, then I'm going to do what needs to be done. And if you're going to tell me what can and can't, what I'm allowed and not allowed to do, then maybe it's probably not a good fit. And those types of people, by the way, or those types of businesses, franchises, et cetera, probably always have trouble getting results because of that. But you can't fix that. You can't change that. So you can either attempt to work within the constraints provided, or you can walk away and find another client. And if I were you, honestly, I would, you know, by the way, guys, the whole point of the DHA program or the 3-day workshop, et cetera, is so that you can have you can build a pipeline full of leads for your own agency, so that you don't have to bend yourself like a pretzel in order to try to make something work for a pain in the ass client. You know, if you had a pipeline, David, I don't know whether you do or not, but let's just hypothetically state, if you had a pipeline full of, you know, 20 warm leads that are interested in what you have to offer, then it wouldn't be so necessary to try to bend over backwards for this one client. Now, if it's a franchise and there's potential to get a lot of business out of them, then it might be worth it. But if it's one location and they're restricting what you can and can't do, so that it's going to make it difficult for you to ever show them results, then you're always on the losing end of that anyways. And they're going to blame you for the lack of performance. And so is it worth the trouble? In my opinion, no. And so if you had a larger pipeline, full of leads that are other people that are in line waiting to hear about your products or services, then, you know, you could basically draw a line in the sand and say, okay, well, there's certain things that I won't do. And this is one of those. You know, this is one of those circumstances. I'm not going to work with those constraints. So that's up to you. Again, I can't make that decision for you. But if I were to attempt it, I would have to look at the overall project and then determine if I thought that I could produce the result without doing everything externally the way that I just described. Okay, if I thought I could get results doing everything externally the way that I just described, then I would probably proceed with it anyway. But if I thought that it was going to be very difficult for me to show the results because of the constraints, then I know from experience that the client is always going to blame you, even though they're the ones that put the roadblocks in place that are preventing the results. But they're going to blame you. Same thing as with link building clients that have shit on page for some of their sites, and they expect links to be magic bullets or magic pills that just solve all the poor on page. It's never going to happen. All the links in the world aren't going to fix bad on page. And so, but yet, of course, even it's always my fault though, if they're not getting gain, like if they're not getting results, you know what I mean? Because I'm the link builder. Nobody wants to blame themselves. And so that's why I'm saying, like, you know, the franchise is probably no different. They're going to blame everybody but themselves, even though they're the ones putting the constraints in place, right? So you have to be aware of that type of a headache if you're going to deal with it. I recommend avoiding that kind of headache if I were you, just out of personal experience. Guys, every time I've taken on a project where I had a gut feeling it was going to be a problem, it always turned out to be true. And it's not worth it. Because it's just creates so much stress and everything else. And look, I understand if you do, and I'm not talking to David specifically here, but if you have a client, you know, if you don't have a lot of potential clients in progress or in the pipeline or whatever, then you try to make every contact with a prospect work, right? Because you want the revenue. And I get it. I've been there. I've done it. Bend over backwards, twist like a pretzel, whatever, to try to secure that revenue. But I found that, you know, if I feel like it's going to be a problem, but yet I make the proposal anyways, I end up regretting it at a later time. And so, in my opinion, you're better just to fill your pipeline full of other leads and then just work with the ones that are going to be easy. Like that's the whole DHA program in a nutshell, by the way, guys, is filling your pipeline full of leads and then targeting the areas where you've already identified it's low competition so that you can get them results very quickly without a lot of back-breaking SEO work. And that's no shit. My whole program is about identifying low competition areas and like laser focused, like rifle approach targeting them. And so that when you land a client in that area, you know already that you can get results for them very quickly with very little SEO work, almost entirely on-page SEO can get them results. Yes, some projects are going to require some off-page, but significantly less than trying to target the areas that have a lot of search volume and that are really competitive, right? Charge lesser amount, but you have easier work. It's easier to fulfill. You get results faster. Your clients are happy, and it requires less maintenance and less management. Why not build your business on a foundation of those types of clients instead of the pain in the ass ones that put all these constraints in place or that are going to take you months and months of back-breaking work to get results for? Unless you're charging appropriately, accordingly for that kind of work, don't do it. Target other areas, lower competition areas. And that's what the DHA program is all about, guys. Okay. Hopefully that's clear. Yeah, so I would have a real, you know, meditate through that, David, before I would proceed with it if I were you.